Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to stage CEO of WiseKey, Carlos Moreira.
So good morning, everybody. And first of all, just to thank Don for the opportunity for WiseKey and WiseCoin, the company that we have been showcasing, to be with you all here in Toronto. Just some words about me. I started my career in the United Nations. I was the Chief Security Officer of the UN in Geneva during a very historical time, which was when the World Wide Web was also invented in Geneva by Tim Berners-Lee, as mentioned before, in a laboratory with the name was CERN. At that time, my job was to protect the United Nations. The United Nations, as being the international organization headquarters, is highly targeted. Imagine a hacker to hack the UN. I mean, that will be the first thing they will put on their wall. So actually, we were very concerned about the web. We didn't like the web. The web for us was a threat because the system we had in place before was a system that allowed us to control everything. That was the client-server technology, where every single server connecting to the hub was authenticated. We know the people behind. Everybody has credentials. Digital identification was compulsory. People have badges. So we knew everything. And if anybody will try to access, we will immediately be able to identify that that was a threat. When the web arrived, which at the beginning was kind of philosophy movement to say everybody should be connected, we should not have the intermediary servers, all the servers should relay one to another. It sounds great. As it's sounding great now, the story of the blockchain, actually, it sounds very similar to me. But again, this was not developed by people with a cybersecurity conscious mind. It was developed by people and they have other objectives and other intentions. I remember in Geneva we have a tunnel, which is an underground, large tunnel, goes something like 30 miles, where we have something like 5,000 servers. And in that tunnel, you need to, at the speed of the light, 300,000 kilometers per second, you have to send information that goes server by server, so that goes all the way to the tunnel and come back to the main point. In the previous architecture, which was the client-server architecture, by the time that the light go around the tunnel, which was 300,000 kilometers per second, it was impossible for any server to capture the picture of the deformation of the atom, because they were trying at that time to identify how a atom, a world deforming with it on the speed of the light. So the first experiment was, let's connect in a hyperlinked environment those servers, so by the time the light arrives, the information is relayed server to server without the need to come into a hub, to a centralized server. And that was the philosophy. For the first time, we say, wow, if information needs to transfer at the speed of light, the previous model we had won't work. And that was actually a breakthrough. Everybody said, OK, that is going to be amazing if we don't need to have any more a centralized economy, a centralized infrastructure where everything needs to go through servers. But the problem we had at that moment was we are compromising cybersecurity and trust. So during today my presentation, I want to focus on three areas, which is trust, identity, and blockchain. And I see that like in the previous Greek gods, we had very powerful Greek gods, the god of war, the god of peace, the god of love. And this god, they have some specific responsibilities and powers, but they could not bridge to another god power. They were, each of them, specialized on something. In the present environment, those three gods that we have now on the internet, which is the god of trust, the god of identity, and now the new god emerging, which is the maybe the one with the new powers we call the blockchain, they are not yet talking to each other. They are not yet working with each other. Why? Because in some cases, they are just contradictory to each other. And I give you the reasons. Let's go first in trust. The way trust moves on the internet currently is through what you call public key infrastructure. So you have cryptography root keys that they are dominant. They are companies that they were built in the 90s, some of them in the 80s, that they have ownerships of those cryptography root keys. So those are companies like Symantec. Actually, you have here in Australia, in Canada, you have one with the name Entrust, then it was acquired by an American private equity group. Then you have, in Europe, we have Cybertrust, which was acquired by telcos. Then you had companies in South America. All of them got acquired. So all the cryptography root keys, which is the ground zero of the trust model on the internet, got acquired by private sector companies, then they own those cryptography root keys. So the internet trust machinery, which is the one that allows the verticalization of the trust, because trust needs to be delegated digitally. The concept of trust is a very emotional concept. If I trust Don, and Don trusts Alex, as a consequence, it's very likely that I'm going to trust Alex, because there has been a delegation of the trust. The same thing happens on the internet. If the cryptography root key, which is this encryption key, private key, trusts a certification authority, which is the second layer, the certification authority will then be able to issue trust of a user. And if that certification authority sends another trust to another user, those users can pair their key and trust each other. So the entire architecture of the World Wide Web is based on a bunch of cryptography root keys. Then they are, as I said before, controlled by some companies. Some companies even wanted to go even farther. In the 90s, there was a case where they wanted to mix the cryptography root keys with DNS, which is the other layer of control of the internet. The internet, as the previous speaker mentioned, was based on ARPANET, which was a military network. And basically, the web became the software, the operating system of the internet. Because the internet before the web was used for other things like Gopher. And I remember and don't remember at the time when we have to pay $30 for one search in IP sharp to just search for something, because at that time there was a monopoly on the information before the web arrived. So what happens when those cryptographic root keys are integrated into identity, which is the second God, the God of identity? So because identity, the only way humans know how to transfer the trust into an identity is by putting the trust on a CA, certification authority, that issues a certificate. What happens is that the trust established by the root imposes the trust on the identity. I will give you an identity if I trust you. And in order to trust you, I want your data. I want everything about you. Actually, I want basically like KYC process on you before I trust you. And this is what this company sell money and sell and make billions of dollars, because they are selling an identity which is based on their conformity of trust. So what happened? The person that doesn't have the money obviously doesn't get the identity. But even if you have the money, that identity is not your identity. That identity is the platform identity that is willing to give you that on the basis of a trust. Then they will monetize. And that's how those companies got very big. I mean, each of those companies I mentioned before, they are billion-dollar-plus company, all of them traded and making a lot of money. And these companies went even one step farther and say, OK, what about if we now that we make so much money by just getting the identity monopoly, what about if we also combine that identity with a trust model, and by the way, also with a server model? So you have cases where you have companies that they're trying to acquire network solution. You remember the $16 billion acquisition of network solution by Symantec, VeriSign? Why? They wanted a certification authority company acquire DNS where the .com domains was registered. Because if you have the cryptographic root key ownership, and in plus of that you have a DNS ownership, basically you control the infrastructure. And that's why Europeans started to get very concerned, Swiss in particular, We in Switzerland, we are a small country. We don't belong to anything, so we have to be very careful where the decisions are being taken and who takes those decisions, because our country depends on neutrality, and we don't want to be in a situation that we want to be the servants of anybody. I mean, we would like our population and our industries to evolve in a decentralized way and trusted way. So we, in WiseKey, what I did actually, I created a cryptographic root key, which is the only now root key that is not in the hands of those multinational. And that cryptographic root key, in order to be sure that I do not myself enter in the same cycle of one day getting very big and very powerful, and therefore contradict my trust model, what I did is I created an international organization in Switzerland that is the custodian of the cryptographic root key. So what happened at that moment was that two things happened important. One was that we started to reimagine the concept of identity. And I've been very much involved with the United Nations, with the initiative by the year 2020 that every single human should have a digital identity. I also work with the Clinton Initiative, where I gave 1 billion identity to Bill Clinton so he could develop his Clinton Initiative ecosystem, where they needed digital identities to get NGOs to certify the users. But the vision of digital identity for WiseKey, my vision of digital identities as I start my career in the UN and subsequently in the private sector, is that a digital identity is not your password, it's not your driver license, it's not your membership card or your blockchain key. Your digital identity is your birth certificate. So every single human person needs to have a digital identity that is controlled by the person and owned by the person. Yesterday, somebody said to me in a panel, oh, but what about if that is a baby? A baby cannot have a digital identity. How are they going to control it? So the baby has a custodian, which will be the father or the mother, and they will take care of that digital identity. Because the problem we have, if you don't do that, if you don't issue your digital identity, somebody will be issuing for you, because you are a very powerful product. A person has a value. A digital identity for Facebook, which is what it is. Facebook is a digital identity platform. If you divide the number of users of Facebook, which is 2.6 billion users, divided by the market cap of Facebook, you will see that one digital identity already contributes $500 per person per year to the capitalization of Facebook. And this is only Facebook. So my profile in Facebook helps Facebook $500 per year. And imagine if I add Twitter, if I add LinkedIn, if I add all the places where my digital identity has already been created and has already been used to establish a relation which is not mine. So what about if we inverse the model? And this has been the discussions I had with Don in Davos and has been the brainstorming. What about if we just change the paradigm by giving the person its identity, because I, as a person, the day I born and the day I become human, I should be recognized. The previous speaker mentioned 1.2 billion humans don't have an identity. They don't even exist. In our days, if you don't have an identity, you don't have access to services, you don't have access to education, you won't be able to get, in some cases, government subsidized. You will not be able to travel anymore. So it creates a slavery situation where without a digital identity, you don't exist. Not only anymore in the digital economy, but you don't even exist in the real day-to-day life. So how can we create an identity that belongs to the person? And without compromising this model that those companies that they have the cryptographic rights to issue identities do not want to lose their turf. They want to fight against that, because if an identity is created from day one for free, and your digital identity is stored in a universal ledger that anybody can check, and by the way, you could even think even farther, you don't even want to store the identity in the ledger. What you're going to store in the ledgers are the attributes to your identity, and your identity, you're going to keep it safe in your house or in your phone, or you're going to put it on a safe in a bank, because you don't want anybody to access. An identity combined with an attribute, and this is, by the way, for the people that are in the technology, that's very easy, because the X509 standard issued by ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, allows you to separate the PII, the personal information of an identity, which allow you what we call personal identifiable information, PII, that allows you to trace you down to your name, to your age, if you are married, where you live, how you move. That information should always be under your control and should always be encrypted. But the X509 standard also allows you to add attributes. So attributes could be, I like golf, I like coming to Toronto in holidays, I like to follow Real Madrid or Liverpool. And those are attributes that I am eventually willing to share with the world because I want them to data mine on my attribute. I don't mind Facebook or Twitter or whoever to know what I do. What I don't want them to know is who I am. The who I am is me, myself. I don't want anybody to know who I am if I don't authorize them and I don't propose them to establish a consent relation with me to disclose who I am. So that means that the who I am has huge value. Imagine we're going to create among ourselves now a startup. Imagine that we create a startup that will have 6.5 billion identities, which will belong to our ecosystem, so we don't own anything, they will own it. In plus of that, we will create 1 trillion identities for another thing is coming, which is the Internet of Things. Because as the new generation Internet requires a person to have a digital identity before accessing the Internet, an object as well. One of the, and WISeKey has acquired semiconductor companies, so we have our own chips, and we are integrating those chips now into our semiconductors. And what we have realized is that an object which does not have an identity can compromise everybody else, including yourself. If you put in your house a smoke detector without a digital identity, and this smoke detector is not able to encrypt the data, what is going to happen is that somebody can hack that smoke detector, and with that, hack your Wi-Fi and go to the rest of your house. So the God of digital identity is a very powerful God that has a huge amount of value. I don't think, and I have been working in blockchains project now for 5 years, and WISeKey has a blockchain architecture, and we have been selling blockchain projects. But every time we go far enough in blockchain project, we always step in the point of an identity. Until we don't solve the identity problem, we will not be able to solve the blockchain problem. Because, and I go now to the third God. What happened with blockchain? Great architecture. It sounds magic. As it sounded the web 30 years ago. Actually, we just celebrated a few weeks ago the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web in Geneva. The same comments, the same people coming with the same ideas, saying we are going to change the world. This is the thing. But again, we are not yet aware of something which is critical. Where is the private key of the blockchain? Who owns that? Who is this Satoshi guy that invented and left a paper there, and we are all putting millions of dollars on the top of that architecture? Who owns the key? Where is the private key of the blockchain? Because the blockchain is an encryption-based infrastructure that delegates and tokenizes encryption and cryptography. It's through cryptography that we mine bitcoins, right? And we need computers to break that. But who owns the key? Where is the key? So if we go blindly to build a blockchain revolution without figuring out what is going to happen the day that someone could show up anywhere in the world and say, guys, great, what you did is great. By the way, I own the key. Because if you own a key, you can revoke everything else. You have the revocation rights. And this is like the kill switch of any development. So how can you continue working with blockchain, maintaining that vision that you cannot expand that exponentially until you don't figure out what is the trust model of the blockchain. And the beauty is that it's a compromise. And the compromise is not to leave the blockchain alone and mix the two gods of it. So the blockchain should start to look into using cryptographic root keys, so you can digitally sign blockchain architectures. You can delegate and create self-sovereign identities, which at the end of the day, they are just digital certificates that will be created and loaded into the ledger. But the trust model will not be delegated to the blockchain itself, but to for instance, to the country or to the university organization that will be what we call the third trusted party. The world is based on TTPs. We are all relay on third trusted party. We go through customs, and this is a third trusted party. We get our birth certificate, and we have to talk to a third trusted party. So it's no way that you're going to create a global internet or the internet too if you don't combine the trusted party into the architecture. So how you do that? So you go country by country, and this is what WISeKey is doing with many governments, and we tell them, you have already a cryptographic root key. Case of India. India has its own cryptographic root key, Zambia has, Senegal has. All these countries are now building with us, and we are also partnering with BRI in some of them, what we call blockchain centers of excellence. So we go to the country and we tell them, you have a cryptographic root key, so therefore you can issue your own certificates. You will work with a consortium of companies and institutions and universities, so all your citizens can get a free digital certificate, a free identity, which will be registered in a national blockchain directory, or what we call a ledger. And that identity should be recognized by the government as a base identity. So the good news is that all the governments are inclined to go that way. Why? Because they understand that, sorry, that was the government thing, right? I'll do it again, boom. So the reason why governments are realizing is because they say, wow, if I am sitting on 40 million people like India, 1.6 billion people, why are not able to monetize that ecosystem? If I know that this user has a $500 value per year, imagine $500 multiply 1.6 billion people, or 1.3 billion people like in China, or 400 million like in Europe. So that has a huge economic value. So we go to the country and we say, we will first make sure that your cryptographic root key is interoperable. Means that your identity at national level can be used somewhere else. So for instance, in Switzerland, WISeKey helps the Swiss government with our identity project to let the Swiss people vote online. So every Swiss people has a digital identity. That digital identity has, if you are 18 years older and you are Swiss, there has an attribute, which is issued by the Swiss government, that allows you to vote online. And you go and you vote, and that voting, by the way, is a valid vote, and is casted as a vote in the democratic system of Switzerland. So that identity, if I travel to India, I go to India, obviously in India I will not be able to vote because I am not Indian. Therefore, my identity will be still valid because I am Carlos traveling to India. I don't have to issue another identity in India. But in India, the attribute, which is political attribute that allows me to vote, which is my nationality, will not be activated. But I will still be able to do everything else in India if I am sick and I need to download my medical record, which, by the way, in Switzerland, we have it encrypted in a vault, which is my vault, and that my doctor has no access to that vault if I don't share with him my authorization for him to access the attribute. Or I can go and go to a tourist organization and use my digital identity in case there is a problem, so they know how to find me. Or I can negotiate with a local telephone company to provide me a roaming identity during my holidays. So those are services that, because they are all based on interoperable routes, they can exchange between themselves. And those services has a huge value, because I don't have to systematically renegotiate my identity server by server, country by country, provider by provider. And I always ask this basic question, because sometimes when we talk about identity, it becomes very abstract. I always say, and again, I ask you that question again here, how many of you do you have now at least one digital identity that you can use as simple to digitally sign your email? Raise your hands if you have a digital identity that you use to digitally sign your emails. So you see you have a few hands there, which is very encouraging, but not all the hands. And we are about the elite of technology, elite on blockchain. So the fact of using password and not digital identities to digitally sign and protect your mail is that if I am a hacker, and we handle a lot of hackers because we have to defend against them, that's the first people that look. They know even on your own web browser if you are using digital identity or not. Because if you're not using a digital identity, all the emails that you're going to send to me, they are not digitally signed. So the process of a digital identity not only authenticates who you are, but also what you do. And this is, again, a very powerful technology that if that is stored in ledgers, imagine the possibility to provide services and digitally signed by your digital identity, and services that can be also provided only during a specific time, because you can time stamp that service. So the process of WiseKey, and now I go a bit more into the company, has been really to trying to solve those three things: trust, identity, and blockchain, and how the interactions of the three could really become the pillars of what I call the Internet 3, not actually Internet 2, because we are already, the first Internet was before the web, the second Internet was with the web, and now we are moving into the third Internet, which is with the blockchain. So in the first Internet, we didn't have, the only thing we had was a very rudimentary system that was based for connecting servers and very expensive services attached to it. The web decentralized that power and exploded the reach and make it very easy to access, and that became the information age of the Internet. But if we want to move into what I think is required now, which is the transactional age of the Internet, the age where we can do serious work, where we can maintain the global population active and included, then we need to combine those three gods I mentioned before. The current Internet, and as I go back again in the work of the United Nations, we realize that the world has been built by an elite of people. I mean, only something like 400, 500 million thinkers are being really active on the Internet to decide what the other 6.5 billion people will do. Imagine a world where every single citizen will have a digital identity, will be able to access in a free way a global exchange of thinking and prosperity, and that digital identity will allow them as well to monetize their consent. Some of the very, very serious problems of the society today will disappear, because you will construct a world where the architects of the world will become the humans. I wrote a book with a Canadian friend with the name. I wrote a book in the United States about a year ago with the name Transhuman Code. That is a book that explains the fight between machines and men, and deep dive into artificial intelligence. And we started the work of that book in Davos at the World Economic Forum. I have been running roundtables for the last 10 years with the best minds of the world, trying to figure out what will happen if we are not in a situation where we can empower the person and unleash the potential of the human person with his own digital identity. What is going to happen is exactly what that book describes, is that algorithms are becoming so powerful, artificial intelligence, that if they don't have a stop block, which is my identity, they will totally go through me. I will not even exist on an AI algorithm. So the AI algorithm will replace me and will create me into an avatar with the name Carlos Moreira living on the Internet that has zero relation with a real person. But the algorithm doesn't care. So how to stop that to happen? That by the year 2040, when we reach the singularity moment, machines will be as intelligent as we are and will take decisions for us. How we stop that? The only way to stop that is by, again, reinforcing the human. What we discovered in that research was that the most perfected technology the world has today, the most perfected technology in millions of years of evolution, is the human being. There is nothing more perfected than us. All that hype, than machines and cameras, and all that is hype. a video machine, whatever millions of dollars you put behind, will be still less sophisticated than the human eye. So why, if we are the most perfected technology in the world, why are we succumbing to give our power and knowledge and control to machines that they will not respect us the day they can abuse of us? So converting the human identity, and that will be the first step, into something that AI will need to give away. We will create, like we do in the sea, an area where you cannot fish because we are an endangered species. Humans are already becoming an endangered species of the internet tree. We basically, in our generation, we have the risk to disappear as we know it because machines are going to be more powerful and more intelligent than we have. As you know, we as a human, we have a sequential process or evolve. It takes a long time before we change anything ourselves, whether machines go exponentially. So it's by sure faster and better the power of a machine than any power of human. But if we define what a human is, and that's basically the challenge, if we define what are the uniqueness of humans, what are our emotions, what is the meaning of crying, of having a baby, or having a religion belief, those are emotions that machines will never have. And if they had it, they will be just mimicking them. They will not feel them. So those emotions are the human identity. And if we are able to understand how these emotions are going to be monetizable, because emotion has a huge monetary value, then we should be able to protect humans, not only from the technology point of view, but also from the economic point of view. So the concept of we human, we are the most advanced technology on Earth, is something that needs regulation as well. I mean, we cannot just do that in wishful thinking. We need regulations, and we need countries to start to say, we're going to protect our citizens against the predatory practices of big companies, and they are only there to convert you into a product. Let's be very clear. If you don't protect your identity, you become the products of somebody else. So the way we are starting to do, and again, we are a listed company in the United States. I left the UN, I raised $200 million, I created a company, I did an IPO on the company. So all that continues its evolution. But this is not only us. This is a full network of people that they think the same way, and they want all of us to share a common destiny. So we did already a huge advance because WiseKey is already one of the leading identity companies in the world. We have our cryptographic root key embedded into billion browser. You guys, all of you, has already WiseKey in your mobile phones, in your laptops, in your operating system, because we have been downloading that for 20 years. We also started to secure objects. We have now 1.2 billion microchips. WiseKey manufactures microchips. Those are, by the way, you can go later to WiseCoin and see it. So those are microchips that you can put inside anything. We have connected cars, Mercedes-Benz, Daimlers. We have Cisco routers. We have Swiss watches, 1 million watches with all chips already embedded. And those chips are used to provide a digital identity of the object, so you don't have the issue of illicit trade. $1 trillion of the illicit trade economy is captured every year by all the mafias of the world. Then what they do with that is slavering children and creating all the evils of the society. The bank account, every time you buy a Louis Vuitton bag, you're a teenager and you think that is cool, that bag is actually financing those networks, and this is one of the things that needs to stop. And I was very happy yesterday with the panel on illicit trade on other companies, and they are putting blockchain technology on the top of that. And then we started to think about, what else can we do? I mean, is any way for us to create even more value on the blockchain economy and start to tokenize this value? And then we thought about it. What about if we create a token that will allow us, every time an object talks to another object, to exchange token, because this object needs to validate the object before being trusted. We human beings, we shake hands. Although it looks like a stupid movement, but shake hands. The reason why we shake hands historically is because while we are shaking the hands, we cannot take the knife and kill the person. That's what shaking hands means, right? So it's an act that at least you are busy shaking hands while I am next to you, you're not going to kill me, right? So the concept of digital check hands is what WiseCoin is all about. It's a check hand between objects, then say, we want to trust you before I connect with you. Actually, we went to Daimler, and Daimler is connecting cars all over the world with electrical charging stations. And we say to Daimler, are you not concerned that while you are connecting your charger, that charger could compromise the security of your car? What about if that charger, while it's charging your car, not only do that check hands, but also check then your brakes and your directions, and that your OS operating system has not been compromised? Actually, they love the project. We signed with them, and we are implementing that. So that's the thinking. The thinking is that while you are checking something, after you trust, and this is the only way to create a trust without a kind of centralized trust model, because the trust is done peer-to-peer, object-to-object, they feel that they are in the situation that they can already monetize. So we created WiseCoin. You can see later how that works in the booth. And WiseCoin is now being deployed worldwide. It is the first ever machine-to-machine currency that is allowing us to create a machine-to-machine tokenization economy. Everything is on a ledger. And now not only the car can check the plug, but also the engineers working on the car, they can go to the ledger and see when was the last time this car was repaired, if the maintenance has been done, and so on. So the entire history of the car is there. We also do that for watches in Switzerland. WiseKey has been helping Bulgari, Hublot, and many big brands to secure watches, because Switzerland, we produce 2.5 million luxury watches, which is a huge amount of money because they are expensive watches for our economy. But we have 250 million copies of the watches, and they are getting very good, and the copy is getting as good as the original in some cases. So how can you protect brands against counterfeiting? That's what these digital identities do. This is what those microchips do. So we also, and again, I only have 3 minutes, so we developed a mobile phone, which is here. This is the first blockchain phone. It's a Wise phone. You can see that later. That phone has everything inside that phone that I need to trade. It's totally secure. It is a phone that allows me to, with my digital identity encrypted, encrypt all my data. The data doesn't go to the telco. It goes directly to my encrypted cloud. From the encrypted cloud, I can download the data as I need it, using my digital identity, using my private key. And the phone also stores the attribute I mentioned before in a decentralized WiseKey ledger. This phone is a hot sale now with private banks, embassies around the world, people that they are using the phone just as a secure method. Because if you use your you're using your iPhone or your Android phone, without entering into the discussion whether they are sure or not, those are platforms. Those are not phones. Those are terminals to platforms that they are not controlled by you. So whether you trust a platform or not, I will prefer not to trust a platform. I rather prefer, inside even Amazon, create my private cloud with my digital identity on the phone. The phone has biometrics. They have face recognition. And with that, I go and I access the data on my cloud. I downloaded the data. The phone has also a chip inside, a crypto chip, that allow me to do blockchain trading. So I can go and do Bitcoin trading. I can trade, and has a cold wallet inside with our own microchip. So those are the new line of thinking WiseKey. We are moving from the software to the hardware, and we are now in a situation where we can influence also many other companies, because all of them, they are violating the trust. So if you violate the trust, the products you are acquiring from those companies are also compromised. So just to finalize, just to say that, again, those three gods I mentioned in the beginning are very powerful gods. They don't want to lose their powers. There's going to be an amazing fight. I think the blockchain community has an enormous opportunity to do it well again. I don't want in 30 years' time to be in the same situation where Tim Berners-Lee in Geneva just said a few days ago that he was terribly disappointed of his invention, because this invention, which was designed for good, has become evil. So I let you with that thinking. And again, another question I asked Tim Berners-Lee and Jimmy Wales when actually Don was on that panel, when we interviewed them in Davos, where how you feel by inventing the largest library in the web, of knowledge in the web, and you, Tim Berners-Lee, by developing the amazing infrastructure and have no money. You didn't make any money, where you have now Musk and Zuckerberg and all these guys making billions of dollars. So actually, the answer was very genuine answer. They say, we didn't do that for the money, we did that for the society. But again, that's a great answer and makes a lot of sense, but let's do it for the society in a responsible way so our children can still benefit the life we had benefit today. I leave you with that thinking, and I thank you very much for your attention. And again, Don, congratulations for this amazing event. Thank you very much.